Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Now available to order at your local comic shop, it's Sal Abenanti's new graphic novel, The Hostage.
Hostage is set in the streets of Rio de Janeiro, based on the plight of the street children that live in the favelas. In the world of the graphic novel, being murdered daily, and the hostage is the evil spirit that is raised to avenge their death. Origins go all the way back to the indigenous tribes of the Amazon as the spirits that protect children, especially murdered children. The level of death that these kids have to endure every day. They have nowhere to sleep. They have no place to eat. They have to survive off of begging. There were nobody in capes that were coming to save these kids.
Pick up Sal Abenanti's latest graphic novel, The Hostage. Order now at your local comic shop through Diamond's Previews catalog. Code DEC221534. Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suttress is here. Always happy to welcome Kelly Thompson back to Word Balloon. Good to see you, Kel.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be back.
Well, and really, people are already out and are watching. I'm thrilled. I hope you all have questions. We're going to get into a lot of things, but I did want to start with your brand new project that you got going for Image, and I'm going to bring up the cover in a second. Where is it? There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, The Black Cloak, a very cool mashup of fantasy and crime procedural. You take it from there, Kel. Tell us about The Black Cloak.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say it's a detective story, so it's got a really fun procedural element, but it's set in a fantasy, sci-fi sort of fantasy meets Blade Runner-y sort of world where the conceit is basically like all these creatures from this world, all these separate beings who don't really get along. Most of them came together, as we see in all those epic stories we love, to fight the great evil. And against all odds, they pulled it off. The world survived. And now they all got to live together, and they don't really get along. There's a lot of different creatures. There's a lot of different societies. There's old grudges. And the way the story sets it up is that basically that's the last city in the known world. And so I think it's a question mark of what's really outside those walls, but for the purposes of this first arc, it's all set with inside that. And so that's the world that exists for these creatures of all kinds. And so, yeah, there's a murder. Our detectives, you meet our detectives, they're called Black Cloaks in this world. And they basically catch a case, and it turns out to be a really famous person who is politically very legit target that could spell a lot of trouble for the city. And so they're sort of on the run to get to the bottom of that before things really unravel, or maybe the unsaid thing is before the people in power clean everything up so that they can't reveal it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's you and Meredith McLaren doing this book. I'm going to show some of Meredith's art right now from the first couple of pages, and really beautiful. Incredible. I love the color palette. Who's handling the colors for Meredith?
Meredith.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah. It's just Meredith and me and Becca Carey doing letters.
Okay.
And then Charles Beecham, formerly of Marvel, and I actually think he's working at IDW now. He's our editor. And Ryan Hughes did our book design. But yeah, we're a tight little three-person team for the creative team. Meredith's colors are incredible. I think To me, her style is not necessarily for everyone. I get that. But I think if you take a chance, you might really be surprised and impressed. She's an incredible storyteller. She's brilliant with color. And I sort of think her doing a fantasy book, even though she personally is very interested in fantasy stuff, I feel like her style is pretty distinctive for that genre and even for sci-fi. Like it's very clean and sharp. She uses a lot of color, but she uses a lot of abstract form too. And it's really terrific stuff. It's really beautiful and it looks different than pretty much anything you've ever seen.
I completely agree, and yeah, this alien character design is so interesting as well. And now that here, all right, there's some few other examples of some of the species that are on this world. Um, no, it's really really cool, and also what so tell me because I think it's very adept at both genres that you're mashing together here, the sci-fi fantasy, but also the crime thing as well. Did you guys set out to do this? Did you like tell me about the world building and why a procedural to introduce us to this world?
I mean, I think you can sum up how I came to wanting to do this book as like uh, a why not both GIF.
Sure.
I'm just like, I love sci-fi. I have a complicated relationship with fantasy, but I like it a lot,
Okay.
despite those complications. Science fiction I love, and then detective stuff I love. And why not?
Clearly.
Why
Yes.
not? Why not put them all together? Like these are my favorite things. I'm interested,
Whoops.
or I'm interested in a detective story
Okay.
dropped in that kind of world. But that's a thing I like to play with a lot. I mean, a million years ago when it feels like a million years ago, it was only a few years ago when I was writing Jessica Jones, I wanted to put Elsa Bloodstone in the first arc. And I got a little pushback from the editor who I love, Alana Smith. And she was like, Elsa just doesn't really belong in Jessica's world. And I was like, exactly. That's what's so exciting about it. Don't you want to see what Elsa Bloodstone looks like standing next to Jessica Jones, drawn in this highly realistic, beautiful, Maria Delius art style? And I'm like, I want to throw Jessica up against like I want to mix those things together. So I think I've sort of always had that instinct. And then here, because nobody was telling me no, I was like, yeah, put it in the kitchen sink. Let's just get it all in there. So
I get
um
it. Yeah. No, and also honestly, and I'm so glad you said this, Kelly, because I was going to go this way as well when we get into your Marvel stuff. I like that you are mixing these very, unlikely characters in a lot of these books, and also just in Black Cloak, people have made, and I think fair comparisons to Saga, and that's the thing, as you say, this is a world of many races, so you can do that, but it's great to see, and it makes us think about this. And we were talking off the air. First of all, this is a great first issue because not only from the story itself, but it's if it's not 50 pages, it's damn close to it.
I think it's 51 of story content, and I think the issue itself is almost 60. I think whatever that divisible by 8 is, that's closest to that.
I'm hip. Yeah, exactly. Don't worry, no math today. Don't worry about it. But really, it's great. And I was telling you, I really think there's an obligation when it comes to Image Books or some of these other publishers. When you have a first issue, you're asking a lot from a reader to come over that maybe is only a DC and Marvel reader, and you got to give them more than 20 pages to really, I think, get invested in the characters and the stories, and feel like they've made a good purchase, but also like, okay, this is what we're about. Do you want to come along for the ride or not?
Yeah, and I think that's particularly true for our book, because some of us having a 50 plus page first issue was a happy accident that we can talk about if you'd like, that has to do with trying to do it on Substack. But some of it is you're just really happy it happened because, the way Meredith and I approach world building is, I mean, I don't think we're inventing anything here, but I do think it's atypical for how you usually see world building in these kind of things. Like there's usually a lot more explanation or exposition, and we don't do any of that. We just drop you in as if you crash landed in this world, and you're just running. You're just on the fly with the characters, learning as you go. And I think what that means is it creates questions about all these little corners, but we answer those questions as you need them, but we don't preload a lot of that. And
yeah.
so I mentioned before that I have sort of a complicated relationship with fantasy, and I was talking more about prose than comics, but I often am not interested in all that other stuff. And I don't want to have a really long prologue or have these pages just weighted down with exposition captions, especially not when the art is so strong. The art can do so much of that for us. So I like to pare back as much as I can. And I mean, we don't have none of our leads, because I mean, Essex is the main character, but it's technically an ensemble book. I mean, it's a pair of detectives.
Yeah.
And so I don't really like doing narration captions when I've got sort of more than one protagonist. I think it's pretty sloppy most of the time. So I try to stay away from that. So we don't even have narration captions. You're not even inside her head. And so that requires a lot of really strong world building on Meredith's part. I think it demands sort of a clear view. But I do think in this case, like you said, especially when it's going to be a little stripped down, you got to give them the pages. Like, I really need you to invest. I need you to see enough corners of this world and be excited about them that, you definitely want to come back for more. And I hope we did that.
That's interesting, Kel, because I didn't even notice beyond the very beginning where you're setting up the world before we get to the initial incidents and stuff. That's really the only narrative boxes we see. And
Yep.
I didn't even notice reading it that characters did not have their own narrative boxes and stuff. Tell me about the Substack thing. And that maybe that's one of the reasons why this first issue also is as big as
Well, so Substack, is publishing comics basically digitally. And so we're putting some of these out on my Substack. For paid viewers. Like, they've already read they're about to get chapter 4 next week, or what'll be issue number 4 next week. But when we first started developing, it was still it was a complete, like, undiscovered country a little bit here. So, we didn't know. We were like, should we plan these for 5-page sections? Should we be planning them longer? And so I was trying to keep the script really flexible about how to write for if we're going to have to break in 5-page sections. And so I was trying to keep that in mind at the beginning, but then we polled our readers, and overwhelmingly they voted that they'd rather get a larger chunk one time a month than multiple smaller chunks multiple times a month. And so we were like, great, that is very easy for us, because then we only have to write to one model. And so at that point, we sort of changed gears a little bit, and we switched ourselves back to a normal model. But because of that, the breaks for the first issue, there were a lot of places I could break it, but I felt like that was where we ended up. I thought like that was the strongest break, and that was 51 pages. So there we are. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat in the background. We do not know what's going on with him. He's been crying all day since he got back from the vet, even though it was fine and he's fine. Why are you upset? We don't know. We don't know what's happening.
Don't sweat it, Kel. It's totally fine. I love when pets or even kids pop in the middle of a thing. Hey man, that's life. That's all right. That's why I like doing it live like this. It's okay. But no, that's great. How has Substack been for you?
It's been amazing. I mean, I think, I don't know that anyone last year or this year or whenever is like, oh yeah, digital comics that's all anyone's going to be reading now. That's the future. But I think it's a great experiment. It's a great experiment to see what works and what doesn't work. You have to push into some of these fields to help figure out what works about the model and what doesn't, and what can be improved and what's maybe a no-go. But, for me, like very selfishly for me, I mean, I just could not find the time or money to take a pause on my other work to get these books off the ground if I hadn't gotten the Substack grant. Like, these books are entirely possible thanks to the Substack grant and the incredible readers who have been with us for this last year.
That's great to hear. And I've loved talking to other creators that are taking advantage of Substack. And, I don't know what the end result will be. I suspect, like streaming is to cable and over-the-air network TV, that it's going to be another option alongside. And ultimately, too, I would have. Well, I know because obviously now Black Cloak is coming out through Image.
Yeah.
That fine, your Substack people get the first bite, and then the Image people follow. I think it's a great model, and I think it's great,
and the Substack is a lot more for to me. And it doesn't mean it will always be this way, but right now in this form, it feels a little bit more like when you kickstart a project. Like there's a real personal investment in it. Like you're sort of seeing how it's made. You're maybe getting your name in the credits or being thanked, or you're engaging with the creator. You're seeing process posts. So a lot of the Substack is also about that and not just about comics. It's also about taking control of your own social media and not having to rely on everyone else, although Substack is itself a company too, so it's nothing's perfect, right? I think that worst case scenario, Substack answers some great questions for the next people who take a pass at doing something like this and creating something like this, and it's creating tons of really cool creator-owned content that most of which I suspect, you will see it whether you want to or not in print in your local comic book store, because most of those books are really good and they're being published in both ways.
Absolutely, and again, I think it's great. I think people really were at first like, okay, do I need to invest in this or whatever? And for your hardcore fans, it's a great chance to, and beyond the comics themselves, like you said, get involved with process and everything else. But it's and it gives you guys the chance to pursue some of these passion projects. I mean, I love what Tom King and Ilse Chartier are doing with Love Everlasting, for example.
Awesome. Yeah. Chip's doing amazing work with Public Domain. Incredible. James Tynan has done tons of stuff.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, it was so
much I can't even keep track.
Yeah, it's great. It's great timing for James because God, he was bursting with all this stuff and was going to do it anyway. Hey, and really, hats off to Nick Spencer for being the guy that's spearheading this.
Totally. And I've been so consumed, I can't keep up with 3 Worlds, 3 Moons, but they're doing tons. I mean, they're building like a whole like Miller World style thing. What they're building over there, I mean, it's very big.
You're right,
and very cool, and I think is likely to turn into even cooler things in the future. I also want to shout out Brian K. Vaughan's story. He's sort of killing me because he's doing smaller sections more frequently, so it's only like 2 or 3 pages at a time, and it's all so good that you're just like, oh my God, Brian, but that story is great so far. So, and if you haven't been reading and you subscribe to us, I bet you'll have a whole whack of it to read, because I don't know what they're on, but they've been going for months and months at 2 or 3 pages a week. So it's a lot at this point.
Are you able to handle the other part of Substack in terms of, because beyond the comic itself, they do want you to constantly engage the audience with blog posts or process or whatever?
Yeah, my contract, which, I haven't seen anyone else's contract, but my contract had minimums I had to meet as far as how much I was posting. Sure. But my year's up. So while the comics are still going and, and everyone who's subscribed is like going to get everything that they were hoping to get, because we're still doing all this stuff, but I don't have to post as frequently because my commitment to that part of it is gone.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I've been very much freed from that. I did take a break from that, both because I was putting Substack in front of a lot of things that then had to be picked up, and so Substack went on the back burner while I shifted. But honestly, the biggest thing that's been happening is I've never sent a creator-owned book to print. And so this has been a whole new adventure for me. Like, we're just having our final print files and everything this week, and everyone's been incredibly helpful, but it is a lot. Especially if you don't have an editor, which I do have an editor, but for reasons I won't get into, I ended up doing all this stuff myself, and it's been an incredible learning experience. But woo!
Well, but now you got it.
Now I know.
Yeah, for real.
That has definitely been a soothing fact when I've been like, how am I going to get all this done? So I'm learning a lot. So that's been great.
Are you still enjoying having feet in both worlds in terms of doing stuff for, Marvel in the mainstream, but also now satisfying this creator-owned stuff?
Well, yes.
Oh,
I I I I think in some ways, because there's a point when you're doing creator owned where, you know, you I'm sorry, there's a point when you're doing uh corporate comics, for lack of a better word, DC and Marvel stuff, that
yeah,
kind of stuff, where, no matter who you are, I think at some point you start to feel restricted. I mean, there's a definite formula to a superhero comic, and cranking that out month to month over various titles, it can wear you down a little bit. And there are also always going to be limitations. I mean,
right.
I'm not trying to be critical of any companies or any people, but a lot of the characters that you're handed, they're billion-dollar properties then. So there's a lot of people who have a lot of thoughts about what you can and can't do with them. And I think creators in comics work for hire comics are actually really incredible, the amazing stories they come up with. And I think certainly I can't speak for DC because I don't have direct experience there, but I think Marvel is incredibly open-minded with stories in general, but there are always going to be limitations. And
Sure.
so for creator owned, it's really fun to cut loose and be like, well, nobody's going to tell me no. But it's also a lot of responsibility. I mean, the work I've done on Black Cloak and the Cull this year is just, it's a lot. And there are upsides to being in charge like that. But, at the end of the day, I want to be a writer, not a writer and an editor and a manager and a publicist and and as a freelance writer, you have to wear those hats to a certain degree. But this year was way more than I was comfortable with for me. So, but then I guess what I'm trying to say is, so it's sort of nice to do them both at the same time because they both have upsides and downsides, and they sort of connect with each other in that way. Like, the things that are frustrating when you're working for Marvel, for example, maybe you can't get exactly the story beat you want or the colorist you want or something, but you can turn in your script and move on and not have to be responsible for all of that coming together, which is incredibly difficult and stressful. So,
I hear you, Cal.
I,
I mean,
I appreciate, I probably appreciate all the people I work with much more after this year, all the way down the line.
well, honestly, you're not alone. And again, they're hearing stuff like that. This is where I feel what I do. Uh, there's a kinship there between comic creating for the mainstream, doing broadcasting for the mainstream, and podcasting, and everything you said. It's like no, it's sometimes hearing no forces you into interesting creative choices. I'm sure you've
I
experienced that as
totally,
well.
I totally agree with that. I was just talking to Matthew Rosenberg about this on his podcast. I call that the meat dress situation,
Ha!
which is, I don't know if you're familiar with Project Runway.
No,
But
but no, I don't watch. I mean, aware of the show in general, but tell me.
yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, it's like a fashion show. It's like a reality competition fashion show. It's very funny, or it used to be. I haven't watched it in years.
Okay.
And they would bring the contestants in and be like, okay, it's time to make a couture gown, and everyone would be so excited. And they're like, okay, but you can only use lunch meat, and people were like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But it forced people to be so creative. And I'm
Absolutely.
telling you, 9 times out of 10, later in that same season, they'd have a challenge and they'd be like, it's couture and you have an extra day and double the budget and there are no restrictions. Do whatever you want. And a lot of those people fall on their face because sometimes when you take away those limitations, it's just too much. It's hard to self-edit. It's hard
Yep.
to get perspective on it. And so sometimes limitations can be these beautiful things that create better work just by being things you have to work around or think through. So I'm a big fan of that.
I hear you. Absolutely. All right. You mentioned the cull. Tell me about it.
Mhm.
It started in the spring.
Oh
There's an
yeah,
image
that's
from
my
the cull.
favorite. That image. Oh, look at her. Wow. Yeah, so this is the call. This will also be coming from Image. We are not on the schedule yet, but we've already signed the contracts. I'm just waiting. I wanted to make sure, Madia does this incredible, as anyone can see. It's
Gorgeous.
incredible, very realistic digital painting. It's time consuming though to get that.
Okay.
So we're trying to make sure it's a 5-issue arc. I believe we're coming back. Like the plan is to come back and do more, but he will need a break after that because he has to return to Marvel for obligations there.
Okay.
So the Cull starts as a 5-issue story. It will be a little bit oversized because now that nobody's telling me my issues can only be 20 pages, I've been writing them longer.
Atta girl.
But much to Madia's chagrin. He's like, yeah, that's 2 extra days for every one of those pages you wrote. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Anyway, so this is Madia and I doing, I don't know, a horror adventure. Okay. Sort of Goonies, but older and way, way, way worse. I don't know. Okay. It's basically like 5 friends the summer before they're going to sort of go their separate ways in the world after high school. They get together. They live in a small coastal town that's sort of famous for these rocks which is loosely based on Cannon Beach in Oregon, where they have a rock called Haystack Rock that's very famous. So it's loosely based on that town, and they hike out to that rock under the guise of shooting a short film and, just having like one last adventure together. And they find that A, all is not what it seems, and B, they find even more than all not what it seems, and things sort of go really horribly wrong for all of them. And I love it so much. And I think people are going to be very mad I'm putting these adorable babies through such horrible times. But Maddie is drawing the hell out of it, man. We worked together on Jessica Jones, and it was just pure joy. And doing this with him has been just an absolute delight. He's a magician.
Well, I can tell from this art. I've been pulling these from your Substack, and I'm glad I did that because, God, this is great. Yeah, so yeah, when it is on the schedule, that'll be terrific.
Yeah, I would think late spring, early summer, maybe. That's my hope. Like I said, we're finishing the lettering pass on 2 now. Maddie is about halfway through drawing 3. So I was just trying to get him complete on 3 and then talking to Eric about putting us on the schedule. But he was very excited about this one. I think people are going to love it. I do love that it's wildly different than what I'm doing with Meredith. I think that's really fun,
Sure.
Style wise and everything. I mean, those 2 books in some ways couldn't look more.
Oh, completely. Absolutely. No. But again, it's pulling to your strengths, and that's great. And really, I'm always happy when I find someone, not that I'm, Columbus or anything, but when I literally will discover for my own sake, reading somebody new, and then for them to move on to create their own stuff and hopefully bring the audience with them and stuff. And really, you're killing it with your Marvel stuff, Kel. I mean,
thank you.
Absolutely. No, really, really fun stuff. And before we get into what I know other people are going to want to talk about, like Black Widow and Captain Marvel and stuff like that, we gotta mention Jeff the Shark.
Oh yeah,
it's Jeff. This great, the Infinite comics at Marvel.
Yeah.
And again, very different from what we've just been talking about with the colored black cloak and everything. But this is adorable. And are they all silent?
They are. I think the only word they're allowed to say is some version of Jeff, Jeffrey, Jeffy, usually being shouted. And then there's some sound effects.
Sure.
And then Jeff sometimes says "mer" or but he doesn't speak. So it's just sounds.
I guess he was in West Coast Avengers originally.
Yes, that's he was created. So in the first issue of West Coast Avengers, Stefano Caselli and I did this really fun scene with land sharks that were created by Brodok, which is a version of MODOK where he put himself in a hot body. And He's amazing. I'm telling you, that West Coast Avengers run got a lot of crap, but it's really fun. And people who are discovering it after the fact without the political drama attached to it have really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm gonna have to. That will be one I'll have to catch up on. And I'm glad
Also,
I've got.
Stefano Caselli's art is so
Oh, I know, and I love.
like even if there were no balloons, it would be a joy to look at. It's
All right,
amazing.
fair enough.
So he drew these land sharks, and one of them he drew in the background looked really, really concerned and not happy to be there. And it just sort of inspired this idea for what if one of these sharks like wasn't into it. And so then we brought the land sharks back because MODOK was back and harassing the West Coast Avengers in our second arc. He was part of a what is it? The evil. Oh my God, I've forgotten them. Anyway, whatever. He was teaming up with other villains, including Madame Mask, and trying to mess with the West Coast Avengers. And Daniele Di Nicolo and I were drawing, he was drawing that. And I just was like, I think we're going to create this land shark that's like the runt of the litter or the reject or whatever. And Gwenpool takes him under her wing, and that's it. He comes home with them. And then we knew West Coast was getting canceled, but they knew they were putting me on Deadpool already. And okay. I thought, well, because Gwenpool's a meta character, she should take Jeff to live with Deadpool because she knows Deadpool almost always has a book. And so that will help Jeff survive. And that's so hilarious. She like drops him off under that meta conceit. And, you know, Deadpool falls in love with Jeff too. Everyone does. And, you know, it's just been from there. Here we go. I mean, I have to give credit to Gurihiru. I think they deserve a lot of credit for us eventually getting the It's Jeff series because they're just big fans of him. And they draw him into stuff all the time. Like Jeff on a coffee cup, Jeff in a framed photo on someone's wall. Like it's hilarious. And so, I mean, I think it almost became like a Where's Waldo situation, you know, where people were finding Jeff.
That's great. So
yeah.
Tell me about the Infinite Comic experience. Like how, I mean, obviously there's numbers. Marvel knows who's going online and reading this stuff. And, you know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, but do you want to do more Infinite Comics? Or will you be doing more?
Well, here's the thing. I will do those Jeff comics with Gurihiru until I die or until I can't can't come up with a single solitary idea. I love doing that. But I'll be honest, it's not lucrative for me at all because it's on Marvel Unlimited. I have no sense of sales. I have no sense of anything, and I don't make any royalties off of those. I mean, it's why it would be great for the print issue to just go insane. I mean, how hilarious would it be if we like beat Batman and Spider-Man in March or something with this It's Jeff collected edition? I mean, come on, tell me that wouldn't be funny as hell. But also it would be my best chance to get a nice royalty check because there's not, you know, because of the way that's structured, there's no way for me to know how many we quote sell, and the model doesn't even work that way. So, you know, you hope you're all contributing to making the platform really great and making really good content. But it's the only joy I'm getting out of it at this point is the joy of doing it. I mean, not that they don't pay me a page rate, but, you know, they're simple strips. So it's just not a lot of, you know, it's not even like writing a normal one script because, just, you know, they're shorts. So.
No, I get it. Is it using the vertical viewing, swiping up to continue the story and everything? Is it, from a layout standpoint, is it harder to write to that, or even I suppose that's more of an art question? I don't really.
Yeah, it might be harder if it wasn't working with Gurihiru, but I mean, they're so freaking good. Like, cool. They don't, you know, even when I have, sometimes I've turned in a script to my editor and I'm like, this one's okay, and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. I just, you know, it's fine. It's cute. It's got a bit. It has a turn. It works, but I'm just not in love with this one. And honestly, most of the time by the time I get layouts from Guri Hero, they've turned it into my favorite. And I'm like, oh, okay, I was wrong. This is the best one we've written. They're just really good. They know how to make things cute. They're very good storytellers. They're sort of masters of even very subtle emotions.
Agreed.
It's just like a tiny little difference of a line, or like the tiny upturning of Jeff's nose. It tells a whole story in those things that they're doing. So it's really incredible to watch. I've never had any concern about it. They're excellent storytellers, and they didn't even. I mean, I thought about it a little bit, before I jumped into the first one, and I just thought about their art, and I thought mostly about sort of the bit, right? Because you just don't have that much time. I mean, it's almost like telling one joke, and you just have to get the twists right at the end to make it land. And I just, they turned in their first layouts, and I was like, oh, okay, we're fine. And that was it. We were off.
No, it's adorable. I look forward to seeing it in the early spring. And hey, maybe you'll have that great moment like Katie Cook had with My Little Pony. I remember. I forget which. I forget. Remember? Do you remember what I'm talking about? She was. I forget which convention, but she was on a panel and she's like, "I beat the X-Men this month."
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I sort of doubt we'll get that, especially because this stuff has already been out in some form or another. But I do have to say, it's probably the question I got asked most over the last year by fans.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, will Jeff see print? And most of the time I was like, I don't know. So, I mean, I don't even know how they did this. Like, I haven't seen it. So,
as a print version, I get it.
Yeah, like what did they manipulate it? Like, I don't know how they did it. I don't know what it's going to look like. I hope I'll see it before everyone does. But I haven't seen it yet.
No, I get it. I totally understand. Well, this is like you with, or like Chris Iliopoulos with Franklin Richards. You know? I mean, I love that series that he does. So, no, that's terrific. That's great. Oh, I'm really glad. That's wonderful to hear. Well, you know, I was bummed that Black Widow wrapped up this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, great series. And again, I love the characters, the team that you put her with, that you put together. I thought was really great too. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, tell me about the characters you chose for it. I mean, obviously a lot of spider related kind of heroes and stuff, but no, I loved it.
Thank you. We knew we wanted to use Yelena.
Of course.
I had already been planning to use her, and then they cast Florence Pugh, or that news came out at least that they'd cast her. And I am both a huge fan of hers going pretty far back. I just know how talented she is. So I was like, that's a home run of a cast. Like, Yelena is going to be a very popular character.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, so let's just lean in. Let's put her in it more. I've got some ideas about what we can do for her. I'm really excited about exploring their relationship as, begrudging sisters, right? Incredibly talented, competitive, begrudging sisters who genuinely care about one another, but are sort of shit at showing it, and not great at personal relationships. And we were obviously going to use Clint and Bucky. I was worried at first because Matt Rosenberg's his story, his incredible was it in Tales to Astonish that he did that I can't remember what title it was. It was like one of those team ups or something where he did his Clint and Bucky story, which I absolutely love, but that includes them looking for Natasha too. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off. It's just going to look like I'm repeating Matt. And I was like, you know what? We'll just lean into it. We'll just reference his story and they can like joke about it. Like, we're not going to do this again, And so here we go. But so they were in it, which I love. They've got an incredible dynamic. I think it's very hard for her to choose between those men because they bring out completely different things in her. So do you just want to be this version of yourself for the rest of your life or this version of yourself? Well, that's a hard decision to make, So so and then we had, after the first arc, we needed, I felt, a sort of sub in for an impressionable young, like a sub for her missing son. It needed to be someone she came to care about, someone who she felt was very vulnerable and wanted to help. And then because Lucy became involved with all this stuff with this bad guy. It became like a powers thing where Natasha is sort of trying to protect her from becoming her, or even just the superhero version of her. Like, that's not a life everyone should have. So we sort of built that in, and we added Anya Corazon, Spider-Girl, or Ariana.
Yeah.
She was a great ad. Everybody was really serious. I mean, I'm not saying Black Widow doesn't crack jokes or have a good sense of humor, but it was there was some serious subject matter, and we really needed an injection of levity, some oil with our water, or some water with our oil, perhaps. And she was a great fit. She really slotted in there really lovely, and it helped us build this relationship with Lucy that was nice. And we also had Craig in the background there doing science things. It was fun. It was fun. I loved writing it. It's probably my favorite thing I've done at Marvel, and that's saying a lot because I've been very lucky in them really handing me properties that I really love. Kate Bishop, Jessica Jones. It's been really great.
Well, even that interlude of Ben Reilly in Spider-Man, I thought was great. The Beyond story, and I pulled a panel of Ben with Colleen and Misty. I love the Daughters of the Dragon. I'm that old that
I am also a big fan. I had a lot of fun with them and Spidey. I had a lot of fun with Ben. That was hard, though, to be honest. I mean, it was hard. I've never really worked that way before. I was lucky for the first 2 issues that I was really high in the order. So, I'd been to all the meetings and we'd been doing all the building of the story. But the truth is, there was only one guy ahead of me, only Zeb's issue ahead of mine.
Yeah.
So then I had 2 or 3 issues I was supposed to do toward the end, and I only ended up getting to do 1. And that was a series of, I don't know. But it's just complicated. It's nothing really bad there, I don't think. It's just complicated, and, you don't want to get in the weeds too much. But the bottom line is, it really exposed to me something I'd never thought about with my writing before, which is that a confidence I carry around in my writing is I really know where my characters' heads are at. I might struggle sometimes with plot or, executing a turn or something, but I really know where my characters live emotionally and how they sound.
Sure.
And I'd never before, when I'd worked on teams before, every collaboration or every co-write is a little different, including this one. And I'd never been in the position before where I'm writing an issue, but I can't really read what's happened before. Because, I can read some of it, but only to a point. And so I'm trying to negotiate like this really delicate headspace of someone who's sort of having a mental breakdown, Ben Reilly.
Right. Yes.
And it was really hard for me to find those correct emotional anchor points because it was the first time I'd ever done that where I hadn't written all those things that came before. And so I felt very unsure in his headspace. I think I got there in the issue I did, but a variety of things, including schedule and artists and rotating whatever, meant I ended up only doing 1, which was disappointing because I wanted to do more, and it was a bummer, and I felt like I'd really let the team down. But Jed McKay is a very talented guy, and he came in and sort of batted cleanup on anything that went wrong in that, and we were all very lucky to have him. So
okay, because I really what I read of the 2 issues you're credited for, I felt like the tone was right from a character standpoint and stuff.
Yeah, I'm very, I'm sure to an editor, I'm very particular to an annoying degree. I'm not really willing to put something out that I'm not proud of. So I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think I got it in the end, but it just took longer. And it was, most importantly for me, it was a really great learning experience for sort of an Achilles heel that I didn't realize I had, and that from now on I've got to pay a little more attention to, especially if I'm in a scenario like that again.
Understood. David Santos has a related question. He wants to know if there's been a specific character archetype that you really want to write for one of your stories, but haven't yet.
Archetype. It's a really good question. I don't know that I've got a cavalier off the cuff answer to that. I will say that I've been reading a lot of really interesting older science fiction and some things like that. I don't know if those have identifiable archetypes in there though that I'm responding to. I will say this is sort of a fake answer to the question, but I will say that my partner and I watched Foundation this last year.
Oh, how was that?
Uneven.
That's kind of what I heard.
I was really into it. And even though it had some sort of things that people might consider flaws for the masses, I felt like they were sort of very cool strengths for certain people. And so I really liked it, but they shifted the focus in a way that I don't know if I haven't read the book, so I don't know if that's justified or not, but I just didn't respond to it as much to the last couple episodes. But I think if nothing else, if you like Lee Pace even a little bit, he gives a stunning performance as Empire.
Okay.
I mean, just stunning. And so Empire is what I was going to talk about, which is, and again, forgive me, super nerds out there are going to be like, why is she talking about this? She hasn't even read the books. So I'm only talking about the show here because I haven't read the books. But in the show, Empire is basically an eternal ruler because he basically like rebirths himself. And there's always three of him. There's always a young, a middle, and an aged Empire at the same time.
Yes.
And whoever's the middle place is the one who's got like the most power and control. And so that's Lee Pace, obviously. And so Lee Pace plays, and the other actors beside him playing the younger and older roles do it as well. And they're amazing, by the way. But he basically plays a few different versions of himself. It's truly incredible, cool stuff. And it honestly made me hungry to try something like that with a character. I really don't think I can get there, and I don't know that it's a bit of a cheat because I don't know what you'd call it for an archetype. I don't know. But
describing Empire, and you're right, reminds me of what Jason did during his Thor run, Jason Aaron.
Yeah.
So I can appreciate that. And it's funny, years ago I did a TV show called Prophets of Science Fiction, and I did 3 episodes, and they wanted me to do the Asimov episode, and I've read a lot of Asimov, but I never read the Foundation stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I don't have anything to say. I hadn't read it. And I haven't watched the Peacock show because I heard it was uneven and stuff. But now I am curious to see it. So that's good.
Yeah. I think it's totally worthwhile, especially if you're just a sci-fi person who likes those kind of stories and who's a little more tolerant of, it's indulgent in a way that isn't always rewarding, maybe.
Sure.
But I don't know. I think it's rewarding. I mean, but this is always the hard thing, right? I mean, like, I talk about one of my favorite sci-fi shows is The Expanse.
Yes.
Oh, I'm such a fan. I cannot get enough. The most upsetting thing about The Expanse is I really wish I could write something like that, but I'm just not smart enough, honestly, or maybe not dedicated enough to the research. But
I would say maybe the Black Cloak is the start of something that with your world building.
It's certainly a little bit of a hat tip to it, because I will say that one of my favorite things about especially the beginning of The Expanse is it's a detective procedural. He's trying to solve a case or find a missing person, and I love that mixed in this sci-fi world, again, the same way we're doing it, just like you don't explain it, it's just there's cops there,
sure.
And so I do love that about it. But I was just trying to say that even people who like The Expanse, I hear them saying, yeah, that first season is so rough. And I just want to go, I've no idea what you're talking about. Like, I loved it so much. Like, I'm not saying everything was perfect. Like, it's got some of those hallmark first season, we're still figuring it out a little bit stuff.
Sure.
Like any season of television, although I think that's much less true today than it used to be.
Agreed.
I feel like if you don't have an incredible pilot now, they're just like, go away. You can't make it. Get out of here.
I'm with you, Cuff. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I don't understand what anyone would complain about in season 1. I love it. I think it's incredible. But I think it just goes to that thing that we're all just really different, and not everything's for everybody. And even somebody who likes The Expanse and thinks it's a great show can say to me with a straight face, yeah, that first season's so rough though. And I'm like, you're speaking another language. I love it. So I don't know. It's a salt to taste for everything, right?
I totally understand. All right, now people want to get into Captain Marvel, and I'm happy to do that. And Lautaro says, Kelly, your Captain Marvel run feels like a classic comic with a lot of weekly adventures. Why did you decide to take that approach in this big storyline environment in comics today?
I think the biggest reason is because even though we've had this incredible run that's very long, it's not, I think the Brian Reed one went to maybe 52 or 53 issues, something like that. So we're behind that by a little bit. But other than that, we're the longest Captain, well, she was called Ms. Marvel then, so we are the longest Captain Marvel run.
Sure.
For Carol. But it wasn't like, for us, it wasn't like, and I should apologize to Al because it's not like he told me this. This is just my exterior perception of things, is that, Al's Immortal Hulk was an insane success.
Oh, yeah.
Like the kind of critical and financial darling where they, go, okay, you're getting 50 issues, so make a plan.
Yeah.
That wasn't true for us. We're making it to 50 issues, but it was really every arc was, are we keeping going? It was never like, hey, Kelly, here's 20 issues. See if you can make it. It was that when we got closer to the end, when we were in like the high 30s, they were like, yeah, we'd really like to make it to 50 and we think you can. So like, let's aim for that. But until we started this last Brood arc, I still didn't know that was for sure that's what we're doing. But the Brood arc ends at 49. So once we were in that, we knew we were going to make it. But because of that, you can't really do the old style, Claremontian,
right?
Hey, let's develop a B and a C plot here that we're going to pick up in 2 arcs. Like, you can't do that because you don't know if you're ever getting there.
No, I know that. Yeah, I know sales are really dictating the length of runs more than ever.
And there's so much out there to choose. I don't even take that as a swing on Captain Marvel or comics or anything. It's where we are in the industry right now. There's a ton of really great content to choose from.
Yes.
There's a limited user base, reader base, unfortunately. And, if your name's not Wolverine, Batman, Spider-Man, it's pretty hard to sustain an ongoing, no relaunches title. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
I hear you.
Even the new Iron Man book, that was really well received, that Chris Campbell was on.
My God,
Jerry's got his new book now, and that's got a new #1, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. So, it was really fun for us to do this, but at no time did I feel like we could plan 2 arcs out. Like, I was always thinking about it, but it wasn't something we could commit to. We've done a couple things that pre-laid groundwork that I've been really happy with, but mostly, we just had to, it's like when I'm doing that last arc, the volume that just came out, the collected trade that just came out this past week, that's all about Carol dealing with some internal stuff, and some interior stuff and some power stuff, and and also pushing back against some people who are sort of trying to control her.
Yes.
And that all stems from stuff that we did 2 arcs before. And so I like that we're able to pick up on that stuff, but I couldn't seed it because who knew if we were going to be getting here, So
no, interesting. And well, all right. So is it ending at 50?
I don't know.
Okay, because Radium Theater Productions wanted to ask and said he's loving the new Brood arc, but
how many more years?
He wants to know what it's been like working with the X Office on the crossover, and then he finishes with, how many more years do you think you've got writing the book?
There's definitely not years multiple in it. I don't know how much more we're doing, and I don't think Marvel would want me to say, even if I did know for sure.
I get it.
But I will say that this Brood arc I've been wanting to do since we started, basically. And
Wow.
it took a while. Yeah, it took a while. I mean, because the Brood have been in a different sort of situation because of some X-Men stuff, and so they were off the table for a while, and then the X-Men were not off the table, but off the table in the way that I wanted them to be used, which were just as like pure allies. I didn't want a lot of infighting stuff, and and for a long time the X-Men have been sort of set apart, and that's only started to change a little bit. So
yes,
so it took us a while to be able to put this together. I'm excited. I think it's a great arc to head into the big 50 anniversary issue. I don't know. So, but again, we're on 44 just came out. So yeah, 45. So, I mean, yeah, we'll be at least halfway into 2023 before 50 even comes out. So we got a ways to still figure it out.
Okay.
But I wouldn't expect to see me on Captain Marvel in 2024. No.
All right, I understand. I'll tell you, the previous arc was really great, and I loved again all the guest stars that you had in it. And it was again the last thing I would expect in a Captain Marvel book. But I love her relationship with Wanda.
I do too, and
yeah, clearly.
I do too. I also think, one of the things that I've been lucky about is that I'm very interested in a lot of things that other people don't seem to be interested in. Like, nobody seems to want to do anything with Elsa Bloodstone. I'll put her in anything you'll let me put her in. Jessica Jones, Deadpool, A-Force, where else can she go? I love that character, but, if people aren't super passionate about her, it just leaves more opportunities for me. And so I think that has happened a few times. The things people want to do with Wanda, like they want to do like really big traumatic stuff, and I'm like, can't they just hang out and solve some problems together and like rebuild a relationship that some people used to really love and don't even know exists anymore? So yeah, we brought her into Star, and we had a lot of fun with her there. And but then I really loved some of the emotional stuff we got out of her in this most recent Captain Marvel arc. I thought it was really great.
No, absolutely, and I agree with you. I mean, I did love the monumental turn that I suppose started with, no more mutants.
Yeah.
In the day and everything. But yeah, it's like, oh, I just miss Wanda being Wanda. Just being one of the heroes and everything.
The big thing though, and it should be sort of we should have moved beyond this, but I think it's one of those things that sometimes comics skip over, and so then it feels like it should have happened, but you look back and you're like, well, wait, it never actually happened. And I mean, I don't know that Wanda and Carol ever like fully hashed out how upset Carol was at her letting her be taken. So, I mean, I think the original breakup of Carol and Wanda stems from when Carol was taken by Marcus and basically forced to birth a child and then marry it. I mean,
yikes,
insane stuff. And the Avengers were like, sure, you just met him, you should go, and like had it gets very bad. And
you're right.
A bad idea that was poorly executed, and then it doesn't really get cleaned up very well over the years. Like, and then you throw them together and people are like, oh, should they address this thing? And people are like, oh, I think it's already been addressed. And then the next thing you know, it sort of didn't. And now these characters don't even hang out anymore. So I don't know. Those are just like little continuity things that I like. And I like to bring them in and sort of dress them up and make sense of them if I can, make them into something emotional or powerful if I can. In the case of Wanda and Carol, it felt right.
Wow. And again, forgive me. This is where I feel like knuckle dragging Neanderthal man, but I bet there are a lot of kind of ugly moments. I mean, I go back to the 60s when Stan had Professor X thinking to himself, man, I got really bad for Jean.
Yeah.
Dude, she's a teenager and you're a man. What are you doing? So yeah, sadly there are a lot of these,
Yeah, listen, I mean,
unfortunate
time is
moments.
not kind to all of our stories.
I'm hip.
It's
Yeah,
just a
absolutely.
thing we
God,
got to deal with.
I mean, I had the pleasure of talking to Marv Wolfman about the Titans and Terra and Deathstroke, and it's like, there's no way in the hell you could tell that story today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just stuff like that. It's like that's really and I mean, I don't mean to sound excited in a thrilling way, but I mean it's interesting, and that's why I'm like, how do you feel about that? And he's like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm part of the generation that read Lolita and Nabokov and everything, and it's like, yeah, it is bad. I mean, but she's bad. I mean, and he's a bad guy, so I goes, of course I wouldn't do it today, but it's interesting, but yeah, unfortunately. So that's great that you have the opportunity to address these things and really get more to the relationship itself of Wanda and Carol and everything. So no, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think your questioner and your sort of follow up, I mean, it's right on. They're not always the biggest stories I could tell. And sometimes I want to be more like Donny Cates, and just
Sure.
blow everything out. But, you also have to play to your strengths too. And I tend to be good with female characters, with complex emotional situations, with, naturalistic dialogue. I feel like I'm a little more comfortable with less super powered stuff like Carol. But then again, Carol's my longest running comic. So
Sure.
maybe I am good at it. I don't know.
Well, and I mean, really, in that, I think it was either the last or the second to last issue of that arc, just that one interlude of them hanging out by the pool and just talking and stuff. But it
was totally one of my favorite pages.
Yeah,
I was like, I hope Marvel's going to let me get away with this when I wrote it. So
that's awesome. But that's something Brian Bendis and I have talked about, where you can show of heroes and villains punching a million times, but it is the quiet moments that's a real chance for us to get in these people's heads. And I love that. And it's really, that's where I think, especially as a longtime reader, that's where it's like, oh man, of course, this has always been in front of us. Let's really explore this dynamic between these two characters. And again, I'll even point to what you were able to do in the Beyond arc and everything in Spider-Man, and the conversations, I think, between Ben and Peter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's great.
Thank you.
My pleasure. No, hey, you're killing it. Honestly, I don't know what else is out or coming out that I haven't mentioned.
Well, nothing I can really talk about. I mean, we've got so Black Cloak, that release date is 1/11/23.
Final cutoff to order, everybody.
Final cutoff is Monday. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Please call your shops. Also, if you know your shop well, like, if you're friendly with them, Image sent out a big email offering like little comp packages. You could ask your shop about that if they haven't replied, although they are limited and I'm running out. So
okay.
Anyway. So that's the thing. If you're listening and you want Black Cloak and you know your shop, you could ask them about that. They can just email me if they didn't get it. So then the Cull will also be out next year, but I don't have my date yet on that.
No problem.
Captain Marvel will be running at least through 50. That's the first half of the year. It's Jeff. I don't know if we're doing more or not. I think, you asked a good question before about like, you don't really know sales and things. I know Jeff was a huge breakout star of season 1 of Infinity Comics when they rolled out with him.
Yeah.
I assume he did well for season 2, but I don't really know. So I guess we'll find out if they want me to do a season 3 or not. I did get something greenlit that is incredibly exciting, but I cannot talk about it. And I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to. And I think it's going to kill me.
Oh, well.
So it's very exciting.
All right, well, rest up because we want you to keep making books. And
Okay.
And truly, no, the Cull sounds great. And really, thank you, Image, for letting me get an advanced look at Black Cloak.
Yeah, thanks for taking a chance on it. I'm so glad you liked it.
Absolutely, buddy. No. And really, great talking to you, Kel. Honestly, you're like I said, you're killing it. Keep it up. And whenever you want to talk about something new, I'll keep my eyes open. But yeah, please let me know. The door's always open.
Thanks so much, John. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, everybody, thanks a lot for watching us today and listening. And I'm talking to Julie and Shauna Benson, two of my favorite people in the world, not only from their comics, but also they have been killing it on Star Trek Prodigy, the Nickelodeon show. If you're not watching this show, it is I'm saying this and I mean it, even better than the Captain Pike show, Strange New Worlds. It's the best Star Trek show that's being written. It's smart. It's the right way to use fan service. And they've written several episodes for the first season. They wrote the new episode that dropped today. We're going to talk about it tomorrow night. I'm sure we'll get into their comics as well. I hope you'll join us for that conversation. So thanks a lot for listening. Thanks a lot for watching. And in the meantime, everybody just stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.